Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Fast Modes Quick Chat series. I'm your host Tara, and our guest today is Kevin Vachon, the COO of MEF. MEF is a global industry association of network, cloud and technology providers who together drive network transformation to power the digital economy. Based in California, MEF develops service standards, LSO frameworks and APIs, and certification programs for services, technologies, APIs, and professionals. On today's episode, we will be discussing the MEF's Global Network as a Service event, GNE, which will be held in Dallas, Texas, from the 28th to the 30th of October. The event will bring together industry leaders, executive decision makers, strategists, technology experts, and enterprise users who are building, securing, automating, and delivering the next generation of network as a service. The event focuses on three key themes, which are enterprise NaaS, NaaS ecosystems and automation, and NaaS offerings. Hi, Kevin. Great to have you on today's show.
Happy to be here and looking forward to the podcast.
Okay, great. So, first off, are you excited for the upcoming event? Can you tell us more about what's lined up?
Absolutely excited. This is year two of the event. Year one last year was a tremendous success. It's the only event in the world that is focused exclusively on network as a service. And I think what this year, what we're trying to achieve is to really showcase, bringing all the right players together to showcase industry developments around network as a service. And we're doing that with a fairly diverse set of activities there. But in general, what we're looking at is sort of three areas of topics. Number one is the enterprise side of things, the demand side, great enterprise lineup of speakers. And we have an enterprise leadership council that's helping us shape this, but looking at what they're seeing, what their demand looks like, what they're seeing from providers. Secondly, we're hearing from the various types of service providers that are either have NaaS offerings, evolving to NaaS offerings. So what's going on the supply side? And then the third part is around sort of the ecosystem, how that's evolving, and in particular, that ecosystem has to be automated. This is not a short-term thing, but what's the evolution of the automation progress in the industry? So you bring the stakeholders together to hear their side of this, but at the same time, MEF is in a unique position as being the only really industry body in the world that's kind of neutral to all of these organizations. We're not a vendor, we're not a service provider, we're not an aggregator, system integrator, etc. And so we have the opportunity to kind of take an independent view, and we'll be, of course, delivering that view as part of our introductory type executive message in the main conference piece of the event. So yeah, all shaping up the way we expected it, and lots of work to be done. But interestingly enough, as much as I'm the sort of top organizer of this thing, I'm keen as an attendee just to sit and listen and watch, because I think there's going to be a lot of great things going on, both in terms of progress, or said, I should say, in terms of progress, but in terms of forward-looking drivers for NaaS, getting into AI and stuff like that. So super excited, and we're keen to get going.
Okay, that sounds exciting. And yeah, you mentioned automation, you mentioned NaaS. So what is the role of automation in the NaaS delivery ecosystem?
Yeah, so clearly for network as a service, automation is a prerequisite. You can't deliver something on a demand basis and deliver it in any kind of predictable timeline without there being extensive automation in place. The automation is required within, let's just say the prime retail provider that's selling a NaaS offering to the customer. They have to be able to, automate those functions that are being delivered by the prime provider within their network. And that's kind of what we call north-south. But what we're seeing in NaaS is a recognition that there's a global ecosystem required to deliver NaaS in many cases. And that ecosystem is going to consist of last mile providers to deliver, let's say, broadband access or fiber, into a building somewhere in some other part of the world or country. Um, it's going to require perhaps interconnectivity through data centers, through mid-mile operators. It's going to require cloud connectivity to the various hyperscalers and others. It's going to require security functions being brought in by security technology companies, probably being delivered from the cloud. And all of this ultimately has to be automated, and that's it's not an overnight journey. And so the question then becomes, how do you do that? And the landscape today, um, in many cases, is a quite a messy blend of proprietary automation implementations.
And the next question is, how does MEF's LSO framework support the end-to-end automation of the lifecycle delivery of multi-provider NaaS services?
Yeah, so what MEF's lifecycle service orchestration, or as we call it LSO, is designed to do is it provides a standards-based framework to automate the NaaS delivery ecosystem. And a very simple use case is as I mentioned, a retail provider sourcing last mile access from other wholesale providers or from wholesale providers around the world. Retail provider may have hundreds of these partners. If they used all different proprietary APIs with different service providers, it's an absolute mess and it's not scalable. MEF has actually over 160 providers into that lifecycle right now, either in production or planning to do so with our APIs for that wholesale use case. And then the use case becomes more sophisticated when you got to bring the hyperscalers in, you bring mid-mile providers and data center providers. So and we kind of call that east-west. So it's sort of inter-provider, inter-ecosystem member automation. So that's a big challenge. It's a multi-year effort, but it's also, what's interesting is there's a recognition that the value proposition is obvious and required. And it doesn't matter who you talk to, that this is the right place for standards to play as it relates to automation when we get between the organizations for NaaS. And if NaaS didn't exist, it would be for some other, partnering requirement. So that's what we're doing, and we're getting good traction with that.
Okay, that's insightful, and appreciate you detailing these out for us and for the listeners. So, moving on to the NaaS market, what are the key expectations and needs of enterprises regarding NaaS? Can you share some of the biggest use cases for enterprise NaaS?
Yeah, sure. And you need to keep in mind that sometimes we in the industry get caught up in the hype cycle of new things and emerging demands. And then sometimes we're brought back to reality in terms of, if you listen to an enterprise, in terms of, yeah, that's all very nice, but here's my current problem today. And so, let me start with the latter point. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still seeing enterprises um, looking at ways of achieving connectivity on a demand basis. Just basic connectivity, layer 1, 2, 3 connectivity. And that was sort of the early implementations of NaaS, and so that's still a very prominent use case. And the second thing is, many, especially larger ones, that are dealing with many providers. Excuse me, they're buying services from providers through portals. And these enterprises don't want to have 50 portals, so they would prefer to move directly to an API interface to streamline how they procure and manage these telecom services. So that's another point. We're also seeing, and this is something driven by MEF's Enterprise Leadership Council that we formed approximately a year ago, is that they're looking for, um, you know, circuit information. Again, this is like rubber hit the road, immediate stuff. They want better information from their provider around what's going on. Like, for example, if there's a circuit outage somewhere, they're getting it through an email today or a text or something, and so they'd like to see that kind of content through APIs when there's something that we're doing with enterprise, the enterprise community called circuit impairment management, where they can be proactively notified that there's something going on, there's an outage. And at the same time, we're seeing interest, in the same vein, I should say, we're seeing interest for security related information. Is there some sort of security event going on that they think that a specific enterprise customer needs to be aware of? And they can push that information to the enterprise. The enterprise could then react and request that the service provider take action. These are kind of real things. Now, obviously, you're going to get into um, you know multi-cloud connectivity for as a service. If you look at AI, you're going to be looking at capacity being bought to be able to push to be able to access AI clouds and so on. So those are forward-looking. One of the aspects, and it comes back to ecosystem that enterprises are talking about, is the need for their prime retail provider, if we want to call them that, to be an aggregator. So okay, you have a group of partners that you're using to deliver a service for me, whatever that is. Maybe it's, again, I'll use the SD-WAN example. So you've got a bunch of partners, but do you have visibility into their networks and whatnot? So you should be an aggregator to pull that content together and push back to me, or pull that information together and push that back to me, whatever is relevant to me. So I would say that those are some of the major things that we're seeing. Simple, ranging from simple, basic connectivity needs to looking at the more forward-looking applications like AI, and NaaS will play a role in all of those.
Okay, interesting. So, while we are on this topic, how are NaaS offerings evolving? Do you notice any key trends in retail and wholesale services, service demand, and SLAs?
Yeah, I would say, I talked about the enterprise demand side a second ago. I would say that, actually, I'm going to attend GNE to hear what the operators have to say about their SLA offerings. So after GNE, I'll let you know. But I think, you know, we're seeing that many service providers, whether they're traditional, big service providers, tier one, twos, or whether they're MSPs, for example, they're all figuring out their positioning for NaaS. Some of them are much more advanced. They made the decision some time ago where they're really leading with NaaS. They've already well positioned their offering as a service and have those roadmaps well defined in terms of migrating to as a service. Others are figuring out how do they take offerings, which quite frankly are already NaaS-like. Now, obviously, these most providers have some type of on-demand offerings, right, for various types of services, and they have roadmaps to continue to offer those things on demand, or new services on demand, I should say, but they're not packaged as NaaS. And so I think a lot of them are looking at it saying, okay, we can repackage this as NaaS. That's one step, but what do we have to add to it? And that takes you into, the changes to the, perhaps the SLA side of things, the billing, consumption models. So I think, again, GNE is going to kind of bring those developments to the table, but as a blanket statement, is the industry is figuring out their roadmap to NaaS right now. And like any industry, you have leaders and you have those that are, in the mix, and you have those that are a bit later to the game. And that's kind of why we have something called a global NaaS event to create a platform where these guys can come together. You need to also think think about the vendor side. There's a lot of different vendors in the mix here, right? There's OSS, BSS vendors that have to enable NaaS. There's technology vendors that are delivering technology solutions, whether they're network technology, security technologies that are becoming part of NaaS. And so the vendors, in response to the service provider movement to NaaS, the vendors are also figuring out how to appropriately reposition my products if need be for network as a service. Some of them are saying, "Hey, I can do this stuff today, but we don't talk about NaaS." So they have to, it could be just a marketing exercise for them, and maybe it's more than that. Um, at the same time, we also have the system integrator community, large SIs that are joining MEF, showing or beefing up their ability to show that they can bring together all of the components required for operators to deliver NaaS. So they have their frameworks of, the different piece parts and the vendors and where automation plays and the automation standards and so on, where they can show that this is a model for a provider to move to NaaS. So, you know, a lot of different, and then you've got the MEFs of the world saying, hey, we're looking at how this whole thing comes together, and we're also looking at, how do we evolve our work and our standards, right? So my answer is perhaps a little bit bigger, broader than your question, but it sort of speaks to the different stakeholders that are in the game here and what they all need to be doing. And again, our job is to be a kind of a platform to bring them all together.
Great. On to our last question. Earlier this year, MEF published a State of the Industry report on SASE, which looks at how SASE empowers enterprises to mitigate growing cyber attack risks given rising cloud adoption and hybrid work environments. Our question is, how does a standards-based SASE certification contribute to enhanced cyber defense?
I think that the report did a good job of, summarizing the massive challenges associated with security. And a certification is one of the things that the industry can embark upon to move in the right direction. You might want to look at it from two perspectives. The first one is, the service providers delivering SASE solutions have to license or buy technologies, SD-WAN technologies, SSE, zero trust, single vendor, piecing it together from multiple vendors. They have to conduct extensive testing. If they can buy those technologies or again license those technologies, and there's a certain amount of pre-testing that's happened, that is of value to them. They would have an assurance that pre-testing has occurred, and that testing, in our case, is a combination of certain MEF published standards as well as industry required, what we believe are industry required tests um, for this to be, credible. So they buy technologies that they have been pre-tested, and they don't have to do that in-house, and they know they're getting a certain baseline capability that they can use to build out their offering for. So that's kind of the vendor provider interface, and that sort of value proposition has been there over the many years pre-SASE with MEF. Why many MEF products, hundreds of companies have certified their MEF products, MEF capable products. So, then you look at what's the value for the enterprise or the provider? Well, the provider can say, look, I built my offering in the current phase of the certification we have. The provider is saying, I built my offering around tested products that are guaranteed to be able to do these things, and that's what I have implemented as part of my offering. So again, the enterprise has been given a comfort level that it's not the Wild West. It's not everybody claiming to do this and to do that. There's a third party that has come into play here to validate the statements or the capabilities that the provider is making. So it takes the enterprise buying level, the comfort level. This is a work in progress. You can't just build certifications in one shot where you set the bar so high that the vendors can't meet those requirements, get certified. The providers cannot, be compliant to all of those requirements. So you have to be able to set the certification kind of requirements at a point, at a level which is, in concert to where the industry's at. So and that's what I think we've done, and we have plans going forward to, extend our certification to live network testing within the provider community. Um, as we see the evolution of SASE services, at the end of the day, it's going to be about trying to make it easier for the enterprises to understand what they're getting, and some kind of guarantee that they're going to get what they paid for. So those are our goals.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing your valuable insights and shedding light on the exciting developments and MEF's role in the NaaS space. We look forward to seeing the event and how MEF's initiatives shape the future of NaaS and foster innovation across the industry. And to our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about the event, visit gne.mef.net. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Fast Modes Quick Chat series. Follow us for more updates and insights as we continue to uncover the latest in technology and telecommunications. See you in our next session.